Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
I'm Lola Blanc.
And I'm Megan Elizabeth.
And we're the hosts of Trust Me, the podcast about cults, extreme belief, and the abuse of power.
Now on Podcast 1.
We're real-life cult survivors.
And we're here to tell you anyone can join a cult.
If you've ever dived headfirst into a new self-help program,
or believed wholeheartedly in a spiritual practice,
or even just trusted someone with your life,
guess what? You're just as susceptible as everyone else.
No one is safe, especially not Megan.
I'm the most susceptible.
We want to debunk the myth that people who join cults are uneducated or naive or broken, because anyone can be manipulated by a narcissist or feel good in a new group they've joined.
And we should know we both have been.
Join us every week as we explore the world of extreme belief,
talk to survivors and experts,
and share our own experiences with cults and the abuse of power.
Don't be fooled. You might be next.
Get new episodes of Trust Me every Wednesday on Podcast 1, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors. In October 1988, a woman fell ill with extreme pain and symptoms that no doctor could diagnose. But the world would soon learn that she was being poisoned in one of the most bizarre murder stories you've ever heard. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my intoxicating co-host, Alice.
Oh, Brett, look at you picking up on the puns. I'm so proud. I feel like my work is done.
And I do love things that are intoxicating, so it has a dual meaning. It is both, respectful of you, but also connected in some ways to our case today.
Respectful of me.
In my mind.
For all of you who are about to write, I was going to say, for all of you who are about to say like, oh, that's so sexist, Brett did ask me if I was okay with it before he said it. And he normally doesn't preview them for me because I think he likes to see me stumble with like, especially the foreign words, like what do they really mean? So thanks for the heads up. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Alice. Always trying to keep respect of you. Even if people in the reviews don't respect you, I will. Always.
Who doesn't respect? I'm just kidding. So many people don't respect me. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
It's sad. It's just disgusting. I'm disgusted.
I don't know about that, but it is amazing to see like the most fierce feminists attack me for my like femaleness.
I know. It is weird. But such is life. That's just the way people are. Everybody's got their quirks, I guess.
But let's not dwell on the negatives because we're having a great day, Brett. And this is an incredibly interesting case. I think you guys are going to love this because it is. You guys are always asking Brett to tell you more stories, but boy, does he have a story to tell you today. And this is just sit back and relax and listen to, a horrific story, so maybe don't relax too much. But we're about to take you on a ride of this crazy story and how maybe we can all not fall prey to this similar fate.
Yeah, this is one of those that is it is hard to believe. I mean, it is hard to believe. It's not almost hard to believe. It is hard to believe. Before we get into it, I do want to talk about two things. Number one, a lot of people have asked us about a store. We have a store, but it's kind of defunct, and so we're doing a new one. So if you're asking about that, we are going to put one together, and it's going to have awesome stuff, and we'll let you guys know when that happens. And we want to remind you that we will be at CrimeCon in Orlando. The dates are September 22nd through the 24th. And if you use code prosecutors, you'll get 10% off. So those are just two announcements, two housekeeping matters that I wanted to say at the beginning of the episode, because there are some of you who don't listen and to the whole thing. And that's okay. We don't blame you. We know some of you kind of fade away when we finish a story. So just wanted to throw those two things out there. A lot of people have asked about Orlando in particular, and we will be there with bells on, and we can't wait.
I can't wait. I love CrimeCon. It's so fun. I love it because now that we've been there for a couple, years, I feel like we know where like all the fun is. and mostly it's getting to hang out with you guys one-on-one. So we're really looking forward to hanging out with you guys.
I can't wait. And I just want to say, Orlando, connected to this case, kind of, not really. But this case takes place in Florida. You see that segue, Alice? I'm like a professional these days.
You are just like segueing, signposting like a true lawyer.
I do what I can. So we're talking today about the murder of Peggy Carr. This is one of those cases. Reddit is good for some things, and occasionally on Reddit they'll have some crazy story. And I read a paragraph or two on this case in Reddit and thought, we got to look at this and figure this one out and talk about this, because it is truly one of the crazier murder stories you're ever going to hear. And it is one with many twists and turns, and we're going to take you on those twists and turns. This case happened in 1989. So we're going all the way back to 1989. We're actually going to start in 1988. So Alice, why don't you kick it off? Tell us a little bit about this story.
So 1988, when probably a lot of you were just a twinkle in your parents' eyes. In the fall of 1988, Peggy Carr was in the midst of turmoil. Her relationship with her husband, Pi, which had started off so loving, had turned into a bitter relationship. The rumor around town was that Pi was cheating on Peggy, which Peggy confirmed when she found Pi with his ex-girlfriend. Peggy moved out, but soon they had reconciled. Though even then, their relationship was marked by arguments, and it wasn't long after that Peggy started feeling strangely ill, with pain in her arms that was so severe she could barely stand it. And within just mere months, a formerly healthy woman would be dead, poisoned, and suspicion naturally turned to Pi. But did he do it?
And I know what you're thinking out there. Of course he did. My husband always did it. And this is the perfect setup to believe that, right? You have a relationship that's kind of fallen apart, a marriage that's seen better days, you have infidelity, you have constant fighting, and then suddenly the wife is murdered. And yes, your first thought is going to be Pi. And the police are going to look at him a lot, and we're going to talk about him a lot. Before we get to that, though, let's talk a little bit about Peggy's background. Peggy Carr was born in 1947 in Jasper, Alabama, a place that is close to my heart. So that was another reason that I wanted to do this case. She had 2 children in her first marriage, but it didn't last. In 1987, Peggy was working as a waitress when she met Pi Carr. And he has a much longer name than that, but you can't really pronounce it, and we certainly couldn't pronounce it, and everybody called him Pi, so we're calling him Pi too. She meets Pi Carr, and they fall in love, whirlwind marriage, all the sort of typical things that you expect in a story like this, and they decide to combine their families. Pi had 2 children from a previous marriage as well, so it's basically the Brady Bunch. For a year or so, things were fine, but soon Peggy and Pi were fighting constantly, and Pi was likely cheating by early 1988. As Alice said, at some point, Peggy actually manages to catch Pi in the act with his ex-girlfriend. Obviously not a good thing for the relationship, leads to a separation, though they do eventually get back together. But nevertheless, by October of 1988, They are living in the same household, but they are barely speaking to each other. And when they do speak, it tends to be arguments and fights. Their kids talk about this, that really this was a family in absolute turmoil.
Brett, that's so interesting because you describe their relationship as a whirlwind. And it seems like it was a whirlwind of, falling into love and combining their families and creating this new, like, Brady Bunch happy family. But also that whirlwind carried into the demise of the relationship. Because if they met in 1987, they're already combining their families and kind of like within the year by 1988, just that next year, they're already basically on the outs, which is just whirlwind is describing this entire relationship, but how much someone factors into time as well.
I think you're right about that. I mean, this was a relationship characterized by passion. And unfortunately, it was a passion in both ways. And I think you pretty much nailed that one. Around the same time that all this is happening, in June of 1988, the family receives a strange letter. And in fact, it's Pi that finds this letter. It reads, "You and all your so-called family have 2 weeks to move out of Florida forever, or else you will all die. This is no joke." The family assumes this is some sort of really weird prank. They don't take it seriously. They obviously don't make plans to move out. They don't report this to the police. This is unlike any prank I've ever seen. I guess maybe people do pranks like this, but they certainly don't take it seriously. They don't think anything of it, and they sort of just move on with their lives.
And, I don't blame them for thinking this is a joke because obviously it seems to be a death threat, but there's no specifics. Usually when you have a serious death threat, it says something about you that indicates they've been stalking you or watching you. There's no mention of their names other than the so-called family, which might point to the fact that they're like a blended family. Kids from different families. There's nothing about this that is specific to them. It could have even been misdelivered and was meant for their neighbor, for example. And the fact that the threat says this is no joke makes it almost joke-like. They say when a good writing, you don't overuse the words of like clearly, surely, those types of words, because the more you say something is clear, the more it appears to your audience or your reader that you're trying to cover up something that, is not in fact clear. So the fact that this letter says it's not a joke almost diminishes its threat.
And nothing happens. They get 2 weeks to move out. 2 weeks comes, 2 weeks goes, nothing happens. Everybody's fine. Everybody's moved on. Now we're in October. Things are not great with the family. Seems like this whole relationship is probably pretty close to an end. On October 23rd, Pi is like, I got to get out of here. I don't want to be around this. I'm going on a hunting trip. And so he actually leaves for a hunting trip. He's going to be off for the rest of the day. Now, on that same day, coincidentally, Peggy begins to suffer some sort of illness, and it's one that comes on suddenly. Her symptoms include nausea, pain in her chest, and difficulty breathing. But the worst of it is the intense, searing pain in her arms and her legs. Peggy and her daughter, they actually worked together at a diner as waitresses. And that day, the pain was so horrible that Peggy actually told her that she thought she was having a heart attack. But rather than go to the hospital, which, by the way, free piece of medical advice, if you think you're having a heart attack, go to the hospital. She doesn't do that. Rather than go to the hospital, she just says, hey, I'm going to leave work early. I'm going to lay down. I'm going to sleep it off. I don't know that you can sleep off a heart attack, but that's what she's going to do. She's going to sleep off whatever this is. And it may not be a heart attack. It's just that's how awful she feels. By the next day, the pain is so intense that she can barely move. She can't get out of bed. And she is just balled up in pain in her bed.
And remember, Pi is gone this whole day because he's on that hunting trip. And it's not a very long hunting trip because by the next day, on October 24th, Pi comes back from that trip. And he's told by the children that Peggy is very sick. And he kind of just shrugs it off. Maybe kids are being dramatic. How sick could she be? He just saw her yesterday when he left. But when he sees Peggy, he actually agrees that, this is unlike any other illness that he's seen her have before. And he decides that she needs to go to the hospital. And that's what they do. So they go to the hospital and she is admitted to Bartow Memorial Hospital. And in fact, she's there for several days. She's there from October 24th to October 27th. And throughout that stay, she's in incredible pain. Even when she is put on pain medication to try and get this pain under control, it's not giving her the relief that they hope the medicine will do. And the doctors are totally befuddled. They have no idea what is wrong with Peggy. She's not having a heart attack. They make sure of that. Even though they wondered if that's what it was because of her immense pain. They even test her for common poisons and find nothing. The tests come back negative. They're totally stumped, and they do what doctors always do. They assume it must all be in Peggy's mind, since physically they've run the tests of the usual suspects and everything's coming back healthy. And so because they're unable to help her, and after a few days her symptoms have lessened a little bit, they actually decide to send her home, discharge her on October 27th without a diagnosis or being able to point to what is causing her all this pain. And, when Peggy gets home, she was feeling a little better in the hospital, but as soon as she gets home, her symptoms get much, much worse, and it happens suddenly, just like the onset of the pain on October 23rd.
And this is a pretty clear piece of evidence that this is some sort of either poisoning or environmental issue. And you actually see this a lot in poisoning cases. Poisonings, you obviously can poison someone in a day, give them a lot of arsenic, I guess, or cyanide or something and kill them. But a lot of times poisoners aren't going to do that because that's obvious. They want it to be a slower process, a descent into death that looks more or less natural. That's really what you're looking for. If you poison somebody with a whole bunch of arsenic or cyanide, somebody's going to figure that out. So a lot of times there are these slow things, and you see this a lot in these cases where people, they'll feel bad, they'll feel sick, they're obviously feeling the effects of the poisoning. They go to the hospital. They're in the hospital for a few days. They're away from the poisoner, or the poisoner is not able to poison them, or they're not bold enough to poison them in the middle of the hospital. And they start to get better. And nobody can figure out what's wrong with them, but they're getting better, so they get discharged, and they go home, and wouldn't you know it, they get home, and all of a sudden, they start getting sick again. An environmental cause could be similar to that. If there's something in the home, some sort of weird, argon gas or something like that, it could also be what you're imagining. You're back in that situation. You're getting more exposure to whatever the toxins are, and they're making you sick. I think most people probably thought this would be poisoning, but then something weird happens. So Peggy gets back. It's the 27th. She immediately starts to get sicker. On the 28th and the 29th, she's getting sicker and sicker. Her pain is increasing. She's once again bedridden. But then October 30th comes along, and all of a sudden, it's not just Peggy. Now, two of the boys in the household, her stepson, Travis, so Pi's son, and her son, Dwayne, they are now also showing the exact same symptoms. They decide once again, we got to do something. This time, they don't go back to Bartow Memorial, where they really hadn't had any answers for them, and frankly, just kind of said it's all in Peggy's head. Time will make her better or whatever. They decide to go to a different hospital. They go to Winter Haven Hospital. And Peggy and her boys are both admitted to this hospital. They also are able to see a new doctor. And this doctor is a neurologist named Dr. Richard Hostler. Now, Hostler was stumped. That is, until Peggy showed a new symptom. Suddenly, it wasn't just pain. It wasn't just her feeling like she was having a heart attack. Her hair actually started to fall out. And Hostler, in like a House type situation, I mean, this is like straight out of House. I'm surprised they didn't do an episode on this. Maybe they did. Where he realizes that years before, he had seen something like this. All the way back when he had been a resident, he had seen someone with the exact same symptoms. And it was the hair falling out that really cued him in to what was going on here. And so he suggested that, in fact, this was a poisoning, but it wasn't any poison. It wasn't the kind of poison that you would typically find in a test. It wasn't arsenic, and it wasn't cyanide, and it wasn't, I don't even know what other arsenics people use because I'm not a murderer, but any of the other poisons that you might look for in a blood test, for instance. This was thallium poisoning.
What is thallium? Because remember, she'd been tested for the common poisonings in her first hospital stay, and they found nothing. And the fact that her hair is now falling out, I mean, this is a quick decline. This is within the week of her falling ill. And for this level of kind of decline in your physical health means something is very serious. Well, in the 1970s, thallium was widely available as a rat poison, but it was so poisonous that thallium was soon banned for commercial use. So doctors were skeptical because it had been banned, almost 2 decades earlier, but here Peggy seems to be having thallium poisoning. But they do test Peggy for it, and when her test comes back, the doctors are utterly stunned. The thallium levels in her bloodstream were 50,000 times the normal level. And her sons, Dwayne and Travis, also tested positive for thallium, but at much lower levels. So it appeared that Peggy had been exposed to it longer or a higher dose of it. Now, we talked about how quickly the thallium poisoning was declining Peggy's physical health. And by the time these tests came back, Peggy could no longer speak. That's how sick she was. But she could sign language with her sister, as they had learned to do so at a young age, having been raised by deaf parents. And her last word was a signed Y right before she slipped into a coma.
And Peggy's right to ask that, because this is not something that could just happen. This is not, there's no way, there's no natural way this could happen. And because thallium had been banned, and as Alice said, had been banned for 2 decades, with some exceptions, but some strictly controlled exceptions, it just didn't seem possible that this could be a random thing. Someone had done this to her, and 50,000 times normal. This was a situation where, in many ways, Peggy was already dead. You see this sometimes in radiation poisoning. If you get a dose of radiation that's too high, at the point you get it, you are never going to recover. There's this famous case, something they called the demon core, which was basically a small nuclear reactor that they were using during the Manhattan Project and the creation of the atomic bomb. And the way this worked was you had the nuclear material was in the center. And the way you start a chain reaction is you have this shell. I forget what it's made out of. I didn't do any research on this, or I would have all this. So, people always knock me for getting little things wrong. It's because I'm just doing this off the top of my head, people. Anyways, so they had this shell, this metal shell. Thank you, Alice. It was made out of some material that basically contains nuclear radiation. So when you have nuclear material, it's giving off nuclear radiation. So little electrons are flying off of this material. That's what happens when it decays, is the electrons are flying off. And when you close it, when you put it in the middle of this metal sphere, what happens is the electrons fly off, they hit the metal sphere, they come back, and they hit the material. And as they do that, it becomes more and more energized. And eventually, you have a chain reaction. And the chain reaction is what creates nuclear energy. It's how you have nuclear power. If you have a chain reaction that's uncontrolled, it's what causes an explosion. So that's what they're doing. They're sort of testing this thing. And there's this one guy who's working there with this metal sphere, and it's split into 2 halves. And he's got a screwdriver. I mean, this is kind of crazy. He's got a screwdriver jammed into this sphere to keep it open. Because as long as it's open, it doesn't energize and it's fine. You can work with it. But if it closes, then you have a problem. So he's got this screwdriver jammed into this metal sphere. And as he's working, he bumps it. And when he bumps it, the screwdriver slips out and the metal core closes. And so now it's sealed. And it's sealed only for a few seconds. But he knows if he leaves it sealed, it's going to create one of these uncontrolled chain reactions, and that will be a big problem. It could kill everybody in the lab. So rather than run out of the room, he takes the top of the core and he yanks it off.
Oh my gosh.
And when he does that, When he does that, he receives a blast of radiation because basically the radiation that was accumulating inside this core, when he rips that top off, he gets hit with all of it. At that moment, he was dead. He was dead. He just didn't know it yet. I mean, he knew it, but it took days for him to die because essentially his bone marrow was destroyed. He had no ability to create new cells, and there was nothing that could be done for him. He was always going to die from that point forward. That is a similar situation you have with Peggy. Peggy has been so overloaded with this poison that there's no coming back from it. And she's not going to make it. And once she slips into that coma, everybody knows she's never going to wake up.
That was an intense story, Brett.
And that was actually the second person that was killed by that same core. And what they did is from that, they actually put it in a test bomb. They blew it up. So that no one else could ever be killed by it. There was another similar incident, but
how,
yeah. It's funny.
Kind of like with that story and with Peggy, it's this ticking time bomb, right? From the moment I think after she gets released and goes back home and her sons get sick, all of a sudden, if you're watching this in real time, you realize something is terribly wrong and we're like slipping on the side of a mountain, like an avalanche is happening and there's really no going back because of how quickly she's declining and how serious this is without any answers until the thallium comes up by this neurologist. Just happened to have an experience from many decades previous that he thought to test it. But it's kind of sad because even as the tests are coming back and they're confirming it before they can even dig into why this is happening, she slips into the coma. She obviously would be central. It would be so helpful if we could talk to her and say, has anything been out of the ordinary? Has anyone come talk to you? Where should we start on this investigation? Because it's possible that your sons are right behind you. It's possible that the rest of your family has been exposed to this, or other people who are frequenting the places that you are going are being exposed to this. This should not be happening. And really all of us could be at risk, but it's like Final Destination. Like as it's happening, her eyes are closing and she's essentially gone. And we're now left with this mystery of how has this happened? How is it happening?
And I'm sure the doctor was very frustrated by this with Peggy, but there's no question that he saved these other kids' lives because by identifying the problem, they were able to treat them. Their levels were much lower. The poisoning had not gone as far. They were able to treat them and save their lives. So he was able to do that. And that's sort of a bright spot in this very strange story. Well, at this point, this is a crime, and everybody knows it's a crime. The police are involved, and they're investigating. Because this was a thallium poisoning, which had been banned under federal law, except for under very controlled uses, that brings the FBI in. The FBI is very interested in what's going on here. This is a violation of federal law, and now the local police and the FBI, they are working together. And they knew a few things about thallium. They had a few clues that they were going to work off of from the very beginning. Number one, thallium was only available for industrial and medical use in the United States, and it was heavily regulated even then. You couldn't just pick this up at the local hardware store. This was something you needed permits for, you needed documentation for. So whoever had it, they assumed there would be some sort of paper trail. They also knew something else. They knew where Pi worked. Pi worked at a mine, and the mine he worked at was the kind of place where chemicals like thallium were regularly used. And so they're like, this is it. We got the husband. They were having problems. He was cheating. Their marriage was falling apart. This very strange thing is used to kill Peggy. You might be able to get it at a mine. Where does he work? He works at a mine. We're bringing this guy in for interrogation. We're going to nail this guy. That's what they're thinking is going to happen. At the same time, the police have gone to Peggy's home, and they have collected everything from the family that they could think of that might be a delivery vehicle for thallium. So anything that could have been tainted with thallium, they're taking it. One thing they found was an 8-pack of bottled Cokes, and all but a couple of these Cokes had been drank. And now they knew from the family that Peggy loved Coke, so they knew probably most of these she would have drank. When they cracked one open, they tested it, and wouldn't you know it, it had a massive amount of thallium inside, to the point where one Coke bottle was enough to make you very sick, if not kill you. So now they knew how. They knew how this had been delivered to Peggy. But who and why? Those were the questions that still remained.
That's really crazy, especially because, it's probably something she drank all the time.
And it's really interesting because no one in the family could remember buying this pack of Cokes. Or at least no one would admit that they bought this pack of Cokes.
Were they cracked open? We'll get into this, but obviously it appears that someone has tampered with the Coke bottles. And I always think whenever I open something with the little seal, if I think the ring has been popped, maybe I just, do too much true crime. I actually throw it away and then get a new one. I'm like, I didn't remember hearing the seal crack. Was it already open? Is someone trying to poison me? I've done that on more than one occasion. It's a little paranoid, but it's stories like these that make me think that way.
And so I know there are some people out there right now are thinking of another case that we really need to cover, the Tylenol poisonings, which are one of the reasons you have those seals where multiple people were poisoned through bottles of Tylenol. The Tylenol had been spiked with cyanide. They took the Tylenol and they died. And that was one of the reasons that you have those very things, is to ensure that something like this can't happen.
Angi is your home for everything home. And they've made it easier than ever to connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. If you own a home, you know how much work it can take. Whether it's everyday maintenance and repairs or making dream projects a reality, it can be hard just to know where to start. But now, all you need to do is Angi that and find a skilled local pro who will deliver the quality and expertise you need. Those of you who've been following us for a long time have heard about our house woes, from a tree going through Brett's roof to me sitting in a dark closet because my lights went out and I didn't know how to fix the actual socket. Well, thanks to Angi, I was able to find this electrician who showed up at my door on time, figured out a relatively easy fix. And no, guys, it wasn't just changing out the light bulb. He had to do some electrician work. And I'm so glad I had Angi for it, because they had the home experts for me and they were able to just deliver it right to my door. It took all of the guesswork out of home projects.
And Alice, you can turn to Angi with confidence, no matter what the size of your home or the size of your project. Whether you've got a 100-year-old house like I do, where it seems like things are always breaking, or if you're renting and you're needing someone to help you with moving, installations, or cleaning, Angi is there for you, and they're there for you with confidence. So, Angi has over 20 years of home service experience, and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process. Bring them your project online or with Angi's app, answer a few questions, and Angi can handle the rest from start to finish. Or they can help you compare quotes from multiple pros and connect instantly, which means you can take care of just about any home project in just a few taps. Because when it comes to getting the most out of your home, you can do this when you Angi that. Download the free Angi mobile app today or visit Angi.com. That's Angi.com. Check them out today. Angi.com. Angi.com.
Hey guys, before we move on, I am so excited that one of our sponsors this episode is HelloFresh. I have even more mouths to feed now, Brett. I now have 2 growing boys, really 3 if you count my husband, a new baby. I can barely feed myself. Enter HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store, which is key when you have a new baby, and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And flavor is in full bloom at HelloFresh. Enjoy the tastes of spring with chef-crafted recipes featuring ripe, seasonal ingredients delivered right to your door. HelloFresh does more than just delicious dinners. Not only can you take your pick from 40 weekly recipes, but you can choose from over 100 items to round out your order, from snacks and easy lunches to desserts and pantry necessities. Guys, this is just an answer to every busy mom or parent's prayers. Everything arrives in one box on a delivery day that you choose.
And Alice, it's not just their normal great selection. This May, HelloFresh is celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Try limited time, authentic recipes created in partnership with Chef Serbi Sani of New York City's Tagmo restaurant, and enjoy a cultural taste tour right in your own kitchen. And at the same time, you can save money off your growing to-do list with the help of HelloFresh. HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% cheaper than takeout. So what are you waiting for? Go to HelloFresh.com/TP16 and use code TP16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. That is HelloFresh.com/TP16 and use code TP16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. It's an incredible offer and you need to take advantage of it now. And when you do, you will know why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. Alice, I gotta say, a second language doesn't come naturally to me, and it has been really hard for me to try and learn another language. I struggled with it in high school, I struggled with it in college, and despite all the years of Spanish I took, I really couldn't speak any of it. But now, thanks to Babbel, the language learning app that sold more than 10 million subscriptions, I am finally getting a handle on a new language. And I think all of our listeners should take advantage of this, whether you're traveling abroad, connecting in a deeper way with family, or just have some free time. Babbel teaches bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world. We're talking 15-minute lessons, making it the perfect way to learn a new language on the go. And these guys know what they're doing. Babbel's expertly crafted lessons are built around real life. You learn how to take practical conversations about travel, relationships, business, and more, and use them in the real world.
You're so right, Brett. I tried so hard in my college and high school Spanish classes, and despite years of trying to learn, it never came naturally to me. But Babbel works with 100 language experts. They don't just rely on AI for their lesson plans, and their teaching method has been scientifically proven to be effective. With Babbel, you can choose from 14 different languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, and German. And Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you to improve your pronunciation and accent. Start your new language learning journey today with Babbel. Right now, get up to 55% off your subscription when you go to babbel.com/prosecute. That's babbel.com/prosecute for up to 55% off your subscription. Babbel, language for life. The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to us talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more.
So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates national average 12-month savings of $698 by new customers surveyed who save with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Even though they found the source of where the thallium was coming from, Pi was the obvious choice. He had access to chemicals. He lived in the house. The two of them, Pi and Peggy, were having relationship problems. And of course, who do you look to first in any sort of a murder or a suspected poisoning like this? The husband. He was her husband. But at the same time, their suspicion were at their height. Things started to get really wonky. And I will say, if I'm Pi, I'm like, things are not looking good for me. But first, even if Pi wanted Peggy dead, he was known to deeply love his son, who was now also in the hospital with this poisoning. And Pi had also drank some of one of the Coke bottles, and he even tested positive for thallium himself. Although not impossible that he'd poison himself to cover up his crimes, it seems a little far-fetched, especially if he's someone who works with thallium and knows just how deadly it is, that he would put himself and his beloved son, in such harm's way just to cover up a murder of his wife. And the police go check Pi's workplace. And yes, they did use chemicals, but not thallium. And when they talked to Pi, He never wavered in his story. He said, I have nothing to do with what's happened to Peggy at all. And the police really believed him, which leaves them in a complete conundrum because Pye seems to be the most obvious suspect. He seems to have the opportunity and the access to create this poisoning, but these other factors kind of point against him. So who possibly could have done this? Enter Susan Gorick and the Mensa Society. Bet you weren't expecting me to say that.
Yeah, exactly. If you haven't heard this story, you didn't know we were going there. Mensa. For those of you who don't know, Mensa is this, I guess, society of really smart people.
It's an IQ, high IQ society.
I think you have to be in the top 1% of
Yeah.
IQs.
But it is based on
in the
IQ
Mensa
rather
Society.
than other metrics.
Yeah, I think they take a whole bunch of different tests, but yeah, I think that's the general idea, is you have to be super smart to be in the Mensa Society.
I'm not in the Mensa
And it is going to
Society.
play, neither am I, and it's going to play a big role here. And Alice is right. The police are they're in a rough place because Peggy doesn't have enemies. Everybody loves Peggy. She, to quote Dateline, she lit up the room every time she walked through the door. People loved her. They beloved her. She was beloved. Her smile was amazing. Like all the things, all the tropes, all the cliches, they all applied to Peggy. So she didn't really have enemies. And figuring out who was trying to kill her was a difficult thing. So around the time of the poisonings, Susan Gorick reached out to the local Mensa group and indicated her interest in one particular event that they would often host, a Mensa murder weekend, when members gathered at a local inn and acted out a murder mystery, which sounds so delightfully nerdy. I wish I could take part in it. Just I love it. I just love it. I wish if Mensa's doing that around where we live, Alice, we need to join because that sounds great.
I don't know. Not after this story.
So that year, the event was to be held at the Winter Haven Holiday Inn, because what better place to have a murder weekend than the Holiday Inn? The event was called Voodoo for Fun and Profit, and it was organized by two Mensa members, George Treppel and his wife, Diane.
Over the course of the weekend, the members would act out 4 of the scenarios created by George and Diane. The couple were very proud of their work and considered the 4 murders they scripted to be examples of the perfect murders. The intro to the scenarios read, quote, "Few voodooists believe they can be killed by psychic means, but no one doubts that he can be poisoned. When a death threat appears on the doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and watch what they eat. Hardly anyone dies from magic. Most items on the doorstep are just a neighbor's way of saying, 'I don't like you. Move or else.'"
Now, this should sound a little familiar, right? I mean, isn't that creepy?
Too familiar.
So something shows up, a death threat shows up on the doorstep that says move or else. That's exactly what happened to Peggy. And then after she doesn't move, she's poisoned, which is exactly what this is describing. And you can see how maybe this is going to play a role in this case. And so they're doing this whole thing. They're putting this whole thing on. They have these 4 scenarios they're going to work their way through over this exciting, fun-filled, sexy weekend that I'm sure they had. Each of the scenarios involves poisoning, and Susan was completely obsessed with this. She quickly befriended George, who was this mousy, quiet guy who didn't have many friends or admirers, but Susan admired him, and she loved this whole thing that he had come up with, this whole plot, this whole theory, all these scenarios. She was totally into it. She was totally obsessed with it. And over the next few months, they would become fast friends, to the point that Susan would visit the couple's home all the time. And every time she did, she would grill George on the scenarios he developed, how poisons worked, and how the perfect crime could be committed. And let me tell you, George, he loved this. He loved having somebody who was this interested in what he was doing. When George and his wife needed to move for their job, Susan even asked if she could rent their house. She needed a new place to live. She'd been over there a lot, and they were like, sure. So George and Diane, they agree, and they move out. But it wasn't long before the police descended on Susan's rental home. but they weren't there for her.
You see, George and Diane didn't know Susan as Susan. They knew her as Sherry Gwynn, and for good reason. If they'd looked up Susan Gorick, they would have found out she was a detective for the Polk County Sheriff's Office. Susan wasn't a murderer, and she wasn't trying to figure out how to commit the perfect crime by plumbing the mind of a Mensa member. Instead, it was George who was the murderer, and Susan was determined to catch him, pretending to be a fellow, obsessor of the perfect crime, grilling him on how he came up with these scenarios.
And this is such a cool story because George...
This is so crazy.
He's like a Mensa guy. He's like brilliant, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that I can't believe they haven't made into a movie.
It is kind of crazy because at first when you're talking about how obsessed Susan gets with this, I think a normal person would be like, wow, she's like really clinging on, visiting us all the time, now wanting to live in our home, wanting to obsess over the scenario, unless you are just so smart and infatuated with your own ability to come up with the perfect murder, you would love nothing but to talk about it with someone who's an admirer, right? And look, this house wasn't just any house. It was the house next door to Peggy Carr's house. And George and Diane really, really did not like Peggy and her family. They feuded over several things. This was like almost comedic how, generic of a neighbor fight this was. But things really were not good between the neighbors. And George and Diane had even sued Peggy and her family at one point. George had complained about constant loud music, about property damage, and just about Peggy in general. And George wasn't just a smart guy. He was a chemist. In 1975, George had broke bad, working as a chemist in a meth lab. And what chemical is one you can use to manufacture meth? Why, that's thallium. But it wasn't just that. When Susan had been to George's house, she noticed a dog-eared copy of a mystery novel on his table. It was written by Agatha Christie and called The Pale Horse. It's about a series of mysterious deaths which are eventually discovered to be poisonings, thallium poisonings, of course.
I mean, this is just so
this
perfect.
This story is crazy.
Like I said, it's a crazy story. It's a crazy story. It should be a movie.
How
if
is
you're
it
out
not?
there, look, we got more and more people listening to this show. If you're a Hollywood producer, call us up. Let's make this into a movie. This would be such a great movie.
I want to play Susan because this is
I know,
awesome.
Susan's so cool, right?
How did she
the fact that she's doing this?
Man, going undercover like this is really fun, by the way.
I know.
I think I would just absolutely lose my cool and give my cover away, but she didn't.
And she's not an FBI agent. She's just a detective at the local police department.
She's the county sheriff's office. That's amazing.
It's amazing. But she's all in, and she's convinced them to hand over the house to them. Really interesting Fourth Amendment questions going on here, by the way. Like, I would be interested to analyze this from the Fourth Amendment point of view. We talked about this before. When normally you need a search warrant to search things. So I can't search your house. I can't search your phone. I can't search your car, with some limited exceptions, without a search warrant. But the other thing I can't do is deputize your housekeeper. I can't say, hey, I can't go into their house, but you can. So when you go in there, I want you to check under the bed for the drugs. And if you find the drugs, let me know. I can't do that. If I do that as a police officer, as a prosecutor, that person becomes an agent of the state, and they're now under the same obligations I am. So they can no more do it without a warrant than I can. Now, if the housekeeper lady is cleaning the house and she finds your stash of methamphetamine, she can go to the police and say, hey, I found methamphetamine. That's fine. She wasn't sent in there to do that. She's not an agent of the state. But if she is an agent of the state, she can't do that. So this is a really interesting way of doing this, renting the house from them. You basically have the police officer undercover renting the house, which I think is fine. Police officers can lie to you. We've talked about this before. So I think it's fine. It's just sort of an interesting question. I wonder if whenever this eventually went to trial, if they had sort of suppression fight over this fact that they had rented the house under deceptive means. But the fact of the matter is they are now in control of this home where they believe thallium has been manufactured or used. They're not exactly sure how this went down. All they know is George is the kind of guy who could do it. So Susan's in control. The police are there. They're searching it. And sure enough, they found thallium. And it wasn't just thallium. Like a lot of people who rent a place, George and his wife, they had moved out, but they hadn't taken everything. And they'd left a lot of stuff behind, and they'd left a lot of evidence behind. Alice asked earlier, the Coke bottles, were they open or were they sealed? They were sealed, which was a thing that was very strange. And the local Coca-Cola bottling company invited the police in and said, look, there's no way this could happen here. But there was some concern that if somebody at the bottling company was involved, there might be multiple cases of Coke bottles that had this. I mean, you could imagine, particularly with the Tylenol scare fresh in everybody's mind. I mean, this would have freaked a lot of people out, but there was no evidence that thallium was located anywhere else. There was no evidence it had been any other Coke bottles. And so they didn't really know, how is it possible that sealed Coke bottles could have thallium in them? Well, when they searched the house, suddenly they had an answer. George was a brewer of beer, and as such, he had a machine that he used to put bottle tops on bottles. And this is one of those beautiful pieces of circumstantial evidence that I love, where standing alone in isolation, the fact that the man brews beer and has a machine to put bottle tops on bottles doesn't mean anything. But when you combine it together with the fact that Coca-Cola bottles that were sealed had thallium in them, and oh, by the way, he is someone who manufactures meth, which creates thallium, that tells you a lot. And this is exactly how this went down, or exactly how the police would theorize it went down. But it wasn't just that. They also found numerous chemical textbooks that mentioned thallium. And you might say, well, he's a chemist. It's probably just a coincidence. But it wasn't just that. There were also printouts of chemistry text, specifically the parts of them about thallium, and several books discussing thallium. And George also had a chemical laboratory in his home that had everything one would need to make thallium. You see, George, he wasn't going through the process of getting a permit and buying the thallium and leaving that kind of paper trail. His paper trail was how you make it in the first place. And so it was pretty clear to the police when they put all this circumstantial evidence together what had happened here. George had gotten an 8-pack of Coke. He opened them up. He filled them with thallium to the point that each bottle was pretty deadly. Then he used his little machine to put the bottle tops back on them. Unfortunately for Peggy, her family, like many families in places like this that are very safe and where nothing bad ever happens, they never really locked their doors. So they would go off to work and to school and leave their doors open. And George knew that. And so he just waited. He waited till everybody was gone. He slipped into the home while the family was away, and he slid this 8-pack of Cokes into their pantry, knowing eventually they would drink it. And he knew Peggy liked Coke, so he figured she would probably drink most of it. Nobody in the family could remember buying the Cokes, but it's like everything else. They assumed someone else had, so nobody ever asked any questions, and they started to drink the Cokes. And it was only because of Peggy's serious illness. It was only because she had drank so many of the Cokes that more of the family didn't die. But Peggy did die.
You know, that's such a good point, especially when you have kind of older children. You know, one of them had a job, and it's a blended family. So there's 6 almost adults, right? Not young children, people who had cars and could go out, who could have bought these Cokes. You could have bought them, you know, at the grocery store or just one-on-one at the gas station. So I know I wouldn't think anything of it. Right now I would, because my children are so young and I really am the only one who grocery shops. But when you have 6 potential shoppers in the house, you wouldn't necessarily think of this. So I have to tell a really quick story, Brett, because this is just so crazy. But it was my first year of law school. So, you know, glorious New Haven, not known for its safety. And a group of 4 or 5 women all lived in a house together, and they had just met at like admitted students weekend. So it's not like they had been longstanding friends or anything, but there are multiple rental houses around Yale. And this was in kind of the more suburban part of, if you can call it that. It wasn't downtown. It was East Rock was the neighborhood. And so these tend to be older homes. Like the house I lived in was 100 years old, you know, like wind just blew straight through the walls and the doors hardly latched. Not hard to break into them. But one of these homes, several 1Ls, first year law students, lived there. And so they were very friendly, and it was kind of like the first week of school, and they invited everyone in our class to go hang out there, get to meet each other. So in the first like month of school, there was a gathering there most weekends, some weekdays, and it was kind of known as party house is too strong of a word, but it was a place that people gathered, especially in our classes, were all getting to know each other. And again, none of these women who lived in this house knew each other that well. They knew each other a little bit, but it's still the beginning of school. Everyone's trying to feel each other out, don't want to be that high maintenance roommate. But what had been happening, and they didn't really talk about it with each other, was that someone wasn't really contributing their fair share of groceries. Like they had talked about, let's all, we all live here. We're all students. Let's kind of pool our money and just buy groceries and be a good citizen. If you eat all the bananas, buy some more bananas, but we're not going to draw lines down, the refrigerator or pantry as to whose food is whose, but just be a responsible adult. And food was just like disappearing all the time. And this is funny because I'm friends independently with like 2 or 3 of the 5 of them. And I heard them mention this multiple times in the weeks. Like, guys, I think one of our roommates is like a real freeloader. Like someone keeps eating all the food. And it's a little bit annoying because we're all on budgets. We're all taking out loans to go to law school. And someone just like keeps eating all the food. And this happened for about a month or 2. And the funny thing is, like, I did hear from multiple people, and I don't know, I don't live there, so whatever. That's kind of their problem. It's one of those, situations where I guess you'll have to start putting your name on your sandwich in the fridge. And it started to get really egregious. Like they would buy a box of cereal, and the cereal box would be back in the pantry, but it had been opened and emptied. So it was just like an empty cereal box. They, literally bought a bunch of bananas. So there were like 7 bananas in the bunch. And the next day, like, all the bananas were gone. And not only were they gone, but like the peels would all be in the trash can. So like someone was clearly eating all this food. And they started locking their doors. So it's like, okay, we live in New Haven, maybe our classmates are using our house as a hangout and we don't really know about it. So they make sure to lock the doors. And it keeps happening. And it gets more and more egregious. Like they would make a casserole and, half of it would be put in the fridge and like it would be completely eaten with like the pan left behind dirty in the sink. It was like, who is doing this? So they finally have a house meeting and they're like, okay, guys, like we don't feel like calling people out, but like this is getting a little bit ridiculous. Clean up after yourself or like contribute more to groceries or just stop eating all the food. Like if you're hungry, let us know. And everyone was like, it's not me. And, it's kind of those, like, everyone touches their nose like, not me, not me, not me, not me. And everyone's like, well, so somebody's lying. Fast forward a few weeks, the police are called because a formerly homeless person, I'm not exactly sure what their tie was living in their basement and was stealing all their food. He had, because these houses are rented out every year, there were just lots of copies of the keys around. And even though, landlord-tenant laws are supposed to change the locks to the house every year, that's really expensive. And really, you just have a new set of students come through. And when you have like 5 students renting, who's going to enforce landlord-tenant laws, even if you're law students? And this person had gotten a copy of the key and had been living in their basement. And it was a man living there. And like, thank goodness he didn't have motives like to kill them or do something really bad. All he was there for was food. But they had to come and arrest him and like remove this squatter who'd been living in their basement. So sorry for that really long story, but like that really happened. How crazy is that?
Wow. That is wild.
Isn't
You've
that
not
wild?
told that story before. That's a new one.
Oh, no. It was, and we were all freaked out because we were like, you hear stories about New Haven. We were all hanging out at that house all the time because it was just the social hub of our class. And then to have this like random dude living in the basement for like months, weeks, at least weeks. It was more than a month. I remember that. Was just crazy. And here's like, this shows you how like students will put up with anything. They didn't change, the landlord didn't change the locks or anything. They continued to live there. It's not like there was any sort of recourse. All to say is, you can imagine when you have 6 basically adults living in a house, it kind of feels like the perfect crime. Cokes, everybody drink Cokes. I don't buy the Cokes, but there's a lot of other people who might be doing it. And even though the rest of the family didn't die, Peggy did die. She never woke up from her coma, and on March 3rd, 1989, she died. So like Brett was saying, this was a slow death. I mean, she fell into a coma, October 30th, November? I mean, her body was never going to recover from this, but it was a slow death, as poisonings often are, by the way. And her children would recover, but only after great difficulty. This is not something you easily overcome, even with treatment. And as for George, well, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, among other charges. He was convicted and sentenced to the death penalty. And to this very day, he sits on death row, still maintaining his innocence. As for his wife, although many always suspected that she was involved in the crimes, they really didn't ever have enough proof to show that she was involved, so she was not implicated, charged, or convicted in this crime. And she would later divorce George, and she herself would pass away in 2018. And we know about this seemingly fantastic story because of Susan. She would go on to write a book about her experiences going undercover and solving this mystery, entitled Poison Mind.
Which, once again, I can't believe that book was never made into a movie, because this is a story. It's one of those stories that's so crazy you doubt it's true, but it definitely is true. It definitely did happen. We're going to put several, if you want to read more about this, we'll put several links to various things on the website. A couple other podcasts have talked about this. One podcast that I always enjoy that mentioned this, this actually happens a lot. I feel like this is more signs that the universe is a simulation. As we were working this up, Mr. Ballin covered this case. And you guys know how I love Mr. Ballin, so I was so excited to see that he was doing it. But he's done a podcast on this. He's a great storyteller, so you should go listen to his version of this story. But as insane as it sounds, it's absolutely true. It absolutely happened, and the husband didn't do it. And that, I guess, should be a cautionary tale for us all, that it's not always the husband. Sometimes it is and this is also a great one for Occam's razor, is not always right. Because there is no way this is the Occam's razor theory in this case. That the neighbor had become obsessed with killing these people and did it in the craziest possible way. So it's a great story, mind-blowing story.
It also shows, by the way, that the smartest people aren't always the smartest.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? And all praise to Susan Gorick and the work she did. Fantastic. I mean, also just great police work, right? I mean, just so the ultimate police officer. The book is available in sort of paperback, so you can still check it out if you want to. Really should re-release this one. I feel like this is the kind of story in the age of the internet that would totally go viral. Just the right circumstance, the right person does a TikTok about this, and all of a sudden everybody be talking about it. There'd be a Netflix special. So maybe someone will listen to this and do it.
That is a crazy story.
It's a crazy story. It's one of the crazier ones we've done. And we've done some crazy stories, but this one is really mind-blowing.
And you don't even need any mystery for it to be crazy. I mean, you know exactly what happened, and that's what makes it so crazy.
Right. We don't do a lot of solved stories, but this is one we definitely wanted to do. Definitely wanted to share with you guys because it blew our minds and hopefully it blew yours. Would love to hear what you think about this one. prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Thank you to all of you watching on YouTube, and thank you especially to those of you who support us on Patreon. I hope you guys are enjoying getting your episodes early and ad-free, and I hope you're also enjoying all the live shows that we get to do with you. We did one last night. It was a ton of fun. It's so great to do them. It's great to have your comments and questions coming in as we do it. It actually makes the show better because we sort of like refine in real time some of the things we're saying. So really enjoy those. We hope to continue to do those into the future. Well, Alice, before we sign off for today, is there anything else you want to add to this remarkable story?
Nothing to add except, I mean, I know we've, been in awe of all the things happening. This is incredibly sad. I mean, Peggy should not have died, and I'm so glad that they were able to reverse the poisoning on her sons and on Pi as well, that there were not more victims, because you could have easily seen that this could have been an entire household tragedy. And so it is incredibly sad what happened to Peggy, but what a story. I'm going to go read this book now.
And it's incredibly scary in a way. I mean, obviously this is not going to happen to anyone out there listening. It's not like you have to worry about this happening to you. But when it did happen, there was nothing Peggy could have done. there's no way to even blame the victim in this story because this was completely unavoidable for her. And it was, in a lot of ways, it was the perfect crime. And it probably should have been the perfect crime. And if it hadn't been for a few mistakes, some cockiness by the murderers, and some really great police work by Susan, maybe they would have gotten away with it. And George, as Alice said, claims to this day he's innocent. He's not, but we'll see if the ultimate justice is ever served on George. We'll have to wait and see. But tragic story, but like Alice said, at least the rest of the family was able to be saved. Great police work, great medical work. There was a lot of good things about this case,
By the way, way to spot thallium poisoning when it was like absolutely not on anyone's radar.
Yeah, so props to all those people who did that. But all right, well, that's all we have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this story. We'll be back next week with more true crime, more depressing stories, I'm sure. New questions and new answers. We'll see if we can figure something out. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. I'm trying to think if there's anything I want to talk about at the beginning.
I'm sorry.
Don't. Yeah, it's okay. Don't apologize.
Is there any
I'll
like
just...
particular point you want to make about Peggy that we can like delve into? How do you call that? Is it thallium?
Thallium poisoning.
Thallium.
Yeah. It's pretty rough, man.
What?
The whole thing.
Oh, him being guilty? Yeah.
He's definitely guilty.
God, I finished watching his interrogations, or not. They're not interrogations, but
The interviews.
He's not even a good actor.
See what's streaming free all month long during Amplify AAPI Voices on PlutoTV. Watch shows like Kim's Convenience with Simu Liu and amazing movies like Meet the Patels and Jason Momoa in Braven. Plus, PlutoTV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows available on live and on demand. Download PlutoTV on all your favorite devices for free. PlutoTV. Stream now, pay never.